welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stober. Now last year, precisely in July, President Muhammadu Buhari established the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council that aims at making Nigeria an easier place to do business. The council, chaired by the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, swung into action with practicable reforms from February to April this year through a 60-day national action plan to remove critical bottlenecks and bureaucratic constraints to doing business. Now this it has done by streamlining procedures and improving timelines for businesses to get connected to the grid and also ensure medium and small enterprises have more access to credit facilities. A development analysts believe will improve on Nigeria's by the World Bank. Now, what mechanism is in place to sustain the project? Where is the place of the private sector? Now, these are some of the issues we'll be considering tonight on NTA Tuesday Live. But first, let's get to see this report by Vivian Idekpefo.
Under 4 years, two people have passed through me now. My dream is that to move and get a work showroom. That's my dream.
Emmanuel Sambo is a boarding furniture maker with a dream to blossom into a world-class manufacturer. Like other entrepreneurs in Nigeria, Emmanuel says the growth of his business is hampered by challenges that range from access to finance, multiple taxation, high cost of production, among other things.
I'm using electrical power. I make use of highest 45 minutes, I'm done. Okay. But this now, I've been doing this now over an hour, doing this. And up to now, I can see there are many on the ground. I've been through with them. Normally, our gain there, we gain of 10,000 naira, 15,000 in it. I make this 30,000, I sell it like 45,000. That's how we do the business. But if I use Gen, I sell it 30,000, 35, less than. We don't have a lot of gain indeed.
We have to provide an enabling environment for both the local entrepreneurs and the foreign entrepreneurs to come in and do business with us. In all ramifications, in permits, getting land, getting facilities like even bank loans and so on and so forth.
Nigeria is described by PricewaterhouseCoopers as one of the potential power economies of the world, Africa's giant and West Africa's choice destination for growth and investment. With a thriving youth population calculated as more than half of the 182 million populace, according to the National Population Commission, Nigeria has the advantage of a bulging labor force and its related components. Its increased visibility on the global scene is, however, threatened by the continuous low ranking from international organizations such as the World Bank, which placed the country at 169 in the Ease of Doing Business Index report for 2017. The country equally ranks 127 in Global Competitiveness Index report for 2016, measured against 12 pillars of policies, set of institutions, and other factors that affect the sustainable current and medium-term levels of economic prosperity.
And foreign investors have a number of measures by which they check the risk in a particular country. These measures are how quickly do they get certifications for some requirements in their business, how clear are regulations regarding the industry they want to get into. You know, how can they protect their legal and property rights in case they go in there and they have problems? These are all things that, and then what level of governance do they have in their country? Rule of law. And the big one, how far away are they on the corruption index? All these things compound because they have an aggregate number of measures and the people who want to come and invest in an economy look at these things. They look at various locations and aggregate all these attributes and make a decision. And when you want to improve as the government has said, they want to improve Nigeria's competitiveness now, what they're just saying is that we want to use a global benchmark by which we will set a standard and try to move up that benchmark. Because when Nairobi, Kenya, or South Africa, or Ghana are far up than Nigeria is on that competitiveness index of the World Bank, it simply means those are easier places to do business.
Analysts agree that for Nigeria to make meaningful economic growth, it must improve its capacity to produce.
Permits, okay, some of them lie with the states or some of them with the federal agencies. Now, the one-stop shop, that was set up in NIPC should be given, they should make it a bit more robust. They should give them more strength. Maybe the officers who represent most of those organizations should be at the management level, at the directorate level. These are people who should be able to take decisions or take the one-stop shop back to the organizations, in the sense that the CEOs themselves must be the ones who nominate those who will be there, so that those, when they speak on behalf of the CEO to make life a lot easier. The tax regime is also one of the issues that we have. Now, we must harmonize our tax system. The local governments, the three tiers of government differently are all charging organizations or business people different taxes in different ways. So this thing, there must be a committee put together to harmonize our tax system, so we know if you're paying income tax, you're paying income tax, and it ends there.
Because to move this economy forward, we need to look at what our core strengths are. Our core strengths lie in solid minerals, lie in knowledge. The other thing we need to look at is the tariff regime. We need to look at the tariff regime. How much tariff are we putting to ensure that the local industries produce and are able to sell, and also sell on the West Coast? And then even as the PBEC does her work, we need to look at exports. Export to where? I hear today that it's more difficult to export things from Nigeria to China than it is to export from Ghana to China. Meanwhile, some of the best honeys you get in the world, some of the best yams and so on that you get in the world come from Nigeria.
The Corporate Affairs Commission had in 2015 launched the online platform to make company registration less cumbersome, and only recently announced a reduction in the number of days and processes required for company registration in the country.
You cannot get funding from government, you cannot get funding from banks if your business cannot be verified. So there is this collaboration between the CAC and SMEDAN and other agencies to ensure that all the informal businesses formalize their registration. And one of the ways to do it is to make the process of registration less cumbersome, to make it easy and cheaper. And the only way to make it cheaper is if the owner of the business will be able to do the registration himself. At the moment, the law requires you to submit a statutory declaration if you want to register a company by a legal practitioner that the requirements of the law has been complied with. Because of this concern, government looked at the framework. The law did not say the legal practitioner must be a private legal practitioner. For Nigerians that may not afford the services of professionals, government says, okay, let an employee of the Corporate Affairs Commission depose to that declaration on behalf of the person.
Well, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. I'd like to welcome to this program Dr. Jumoke Uduoli, who is a Senior Special Assistant to the President on Industry, Trade and Investment and Secretary to the Presidential Enabling Environment Business Council. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let me also welcome to this program Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, who is Special Assistant to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment and Chief Trade Negotiator. Ambassador Osakwe, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much indeed.
Let's also welcome to this program Ms. Yewande Sadiku, who's Executive Secretary, Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us tonight is Dr. Bode Oyetunde, who's Senior Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff to the President. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Now, as usual, we acquaint you with the procedure of this program. At the appropriate time, you can get to join in the discussion in the studio. The various platforms will be on your screen. We advise you take advantage of them. However, for those who will be calling in, we say this every Tuesday. When your call gets through, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV. Just reduce the volume. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And the best way to know your call has been passed through is you'll see your name appear on screen. Once you see your name on screen, it means your call has been passed through. We advise that you just go straight to the point, ask a question or make a comment. Don't bother about the greetings. And I would like to advise that you keep it short so more people can get on the platform. So whatever issues you raise, our guests will be willing to address them. Once again, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. Let's begin by first of all looking at the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, which was established in 2016 by the President. And let's start off by finding out what led to this. What were the conditions that made it imperative to set up this council? And let's begin with you.
Thank you very much. So the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council was actually a culmination of the work that had already been going on in the presidency. So, of course, business climate reforms are a priority of the administration from the beginning. And the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment also, when he came on board, made this a priority. So we started working with the World Bank on scoping and looking at the particular areas that are bottlenecks, internationally recognized across the board, 190 countries. And we decided as an administration not to try and reinvent the wheel. So a number of countries have had successful business climate reforms. A very well-known example is Georgia, Rwanda, Kenya, Botswana, more recently Cote d'Ivoire. So we decided that we would harness what works for Nigeria from those examples. So what you need is very strong political will. You need collaboration, interministerial, intergovernmental collaboration, which is at the federal level, ministers. You need it between the state governments. You need it with the National Assembly and the judiciary, and of course the private sector. So that's how it came about.
All right, we'll return to some of those issues. But let's go over to the opening comments of Ambassador Chidu Osakwe, who's you're the chief trade negotiator.
Yeah. What would you like me to talk to you about?
Hey, well, the ease of doing business. What are the strategies you have in mind as you negotiate?
Well, I think that where trade comes in is looking at the interface between domestic policy reforms, of which the ease of doing business is a major one, the interface between that as a domestic policy reform and our relationship with the region, the continent, and the global economy. It's absolutely vital that the country looks inward with regard to the role of government. And the program that with which he initiated the discussions was simply excellent. Intellectual property rights protection, registration of businesses, construction of value chains, the whole gamut of it. But after this is done domestically, the country, by which I mean the firms, the individual entrepreneurs, the small and medium enterprises. The country also has to think about how they interface with the global economy, with the continent, and with the region. It's not enough to look inwards, is what we're saying. We must do that because that's the foundation. But it's also important to begin to make our producers of goods and producers of services to think almost, to use a classical expression, in an imperial way. Because you grow economies not just by what you do domestically in your local market. You grow economies by expanding trade access in the region, in the continent, and in the globe. The word that is controversial is globalization, but nobody's going to get away from it. It matters. It matters hugely. So where you locate me, I'm hoping in this conversation, is in that interface between what my friends Jumoke, Bode, and Yawande do and what we have to do with regard to championing the firms, the individuals, our SMEs in the region, in ECOWAS. I will tell you more about what we're doing in the continent in terms of the continental free trade area negotiations and in other areas, free trade agreements and the WTO. It's a huge agenda, but it's an agenda that's absolutely proper for a massive economy like Nigeria is.
All right. Some of the issues too. Ms. Yewande Sadiku is the Executive Secretary of the NIPC. Yes, at some point in time, you the NIPC was described as a one-stop center. But we'll come to that later on. But let's look at doing business in other climes and what Nigeria had been doing all along that was not, very business-friendly. It wasn't easy to do business in this country.
Yes. Nigeria has many things going for it. The size of the market, the size of the population, the size of the working force. But Nigeria is also perceived in many ways to be a difficult place to do business. And I think the big thing that Nigeria has going for it is that Nigeria is a must-invest market when you look at, for countries and for companies that are looking for growth. And countries and companies are looking for growth because when it comes to leadership and it comes to discussions about what matters in sectors and in the Committee of Nations, size is important. The person who has the biggest size, will sit at the head of the table. Currently, Nigeria is the 23rd largest economy, estimated to be, by different accounts. By one account, it'll be the 19th, based on some work done by the U.S. Department of Agri, the 19th economy by 2030. A recent report by PwC suggests it'll be 14th by 2050. So you cannot ignore it. And the work that the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council is doing ordinarily should be part of NIPC's mandate. But obviously the attention that is required, the urgency of the need was such that government needed to demonstrate the seriousness of its commitment to driving these reforms with something as powerful and effective as PEBEC. So at NIPC, we're very grateful for the existence of PEBEC, for the work of PEBEC.
It takes off the big chunk of the work of you, does it?
It makes my life so much easier. So we accommodate Dr. Oduole and her team by giving them space in our office.
All right, let's come to Dr. Bode Oyetunde. You're senior special assistant to the Chief of Staff to the President. And let's just get where you fit into all of this.
Well, actually, I'm a senior special assistant to the President, but I sit in the office of the Chief of Staff. So there are a few SSAs that sit in the Chief of Staff's office, and we support the work that Dr. Jumoke and her team in the Vice President's office do. My particular focus is finance and fiscal policy, and in that regard, I've been working closely with the Economic Management team under the leadership of the Vice President, Ministry of Budget and Planning, and the Ministry of Finance. Specifically, through the EMT, we've been looking at various strategic plans. So early 2016, we came out with the strategic implementation plan for the 2016 budget, and the fifth item on that plan was ease of doing business. So we set out certain strategies, including trying to move up 20 paces from 169 to 149 or better in the ease of doing business rankings. Now, during the course of 2016, driven by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning and the EMT, we came up with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. And basically that's our direction in terms of how we're going to look at economic policy and coordination of fiscal and monetary policies. And although it has got three planks, one is investing in our people, one is restoring growth. The third plank and objective of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is to ensure that we have an easier environment for our businesses to become more competitive and to take their stage and their place in the world stage. So I'll come back to that, but that's basically where my work in our office is fitted in, working with budget and planning on the economic plan.
All right, now let's go to certain specifics in terms of production. And these would determine to a large extent how people establish businesses here, and easily power comes to mind. And if you're still grappling with fixing power, how does that reflect on those who want to do business? Because the investor is going to be thinking of producing his own, providing his own power, and that, of course, is not very business friendly.
I assume the question is directed at me.
Right.
So definitely from the beginning of the administration, everybody can bear witness that infrastructure and particularly power has been a primary focus of the administration. both in the budgeting and in the plan. However, the soft infrastructure things also will not be neglected. And when we say soft infrastructure, I'm talking about regulatory frameworks, legal frameworks, procedures, service, customer service, things like that are what this council actually looks at. So whether there's power or not, we would still look at the steps that anybody interfacing with government would have to deal with. Now, definitely the Honorable Minister of Power Works and Housing has an aggressive plan to solve the power issues. Many of us are aware of the challenges in the sector, so I'll park that for a minute. But having said that, there's some simple, quick wins on our part as an administration, how you relate to the regulator with NERC, how you relate with the DISCOs, companies that want to connect to the grid. They don't have to go through, I think it used to be about 9 steps, and we got it down to 5 steps, just by looking at the procedures and how it can be easier for that process to exist. So those are the kind of things we want to bring to the lives of Nigerian businesses, just to simplify what is within our power while we work at those other hard infrastructure challenges. All right,
you call them hard infrastructure challenges, but okay, perhaps we jumped the gun a little bit, but let's go back. In our background report, we had one of the respondents talk about registering a business and all the numerous steps and the requirements. Now, what's going to happen about that?
So when you're starting a business, the main thing that affects you is the cost and the time. We were at about 10 days, and we're aiming to bring it down to 48 hours. Now, what we did was to work with the Corporate Affairs Commission, and you heard one of the special assistants to the Registrar General speaking earlier, to remove the bottlenecks that just seem to take a lot of time and the amount of interface of Nigerian public. Things like business owners being able to use the template registration process and apply for registration themselves without the use of a lawyer. It's optional. Things like having a consolidated form, there used to be 7, we consolidated it into 1. Things like being able to upload your documents onto the portal. Now, having said that, so a number of reforms have been achieved, reserving your name, but the portal has had some instability challenges. So even though we had this 60-day national action plan, we managed to execute, but the consistency wasn't there. So we got a lot of feedback from users. And because of that, we delayed closing the manual application procedure. So we've given CAC an extension of 30 days. So before the end of this month, they're actually working with private companies. Main One is going to host the servers and have committed to 99% uptime. And the portal is being stabilized by a company called Oasis. So it's clear deliverables, action plan, and Nigerians can hold us to it for the end of this month.
Well, we certainly will, but let's ask Ambassador Sakwili. So would you say within the period these measures have been put in place, have you witnessed any increase in the number of people wanting to do business here as against the past where companies had to think it out through before they made any move to Nigeria? Have you seen any?
There is, the Nigerian economy has a gravitational pull, regardless of our challenges. And, you know, we have work to do in this economy, it's obvious. But as Yawande and Jumoke have pointed out, it's not only the size of the economy. There is a gravitational pull, I reuse that expression, because of the opportunities, the abundance of talents, a very Nigerian spirit, which is, to a large extent, it's almost more obvious outside of Nigeria than inside of Nigeria. Everywhere you go, and all of us have been around, in and out of this country, there is a very Nigerian spirit, which is a spirit of enterprise. And so there is a headhunting of Nigerians. There's a demand for a talent. In the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, where I work, there is a queue, a regular queue, a constant queue, a huge queue of businessmen and women making inquiries. Some are probing. They come in different categories. Others are making bids. Some expressing real market commitments. And so the answer to your question is yes, it's there. But we have to improve our play. I think we now have to go beyond where we've sat for a long time. That because we are big, that because we have the opportunities, that because we're a major player in ECOWAS, that it will happen. It won't be automatic. So the push is there. Investors are knocking at the door. Some are still in a holding pattern. So it's obvious, but we have to make all this come together. We have to string it together.
Now, you do expect that you'd have, more foreign direct investment here, but many people would say to you that if local investors are not jumping at these opportunities, then the foreign investors would be a little more hesitant. So what's the local investment climate like in this case?
Can I comment?
I probably think it's I probably think it's here. I should not steal your fire.
One of my favorite topics. So Nigeria is interested in foreign investment, in foreign direct investment, in foreign portfolio investment. But in terms of investment in establishing industry, it would usually, be foreign direct investment. And we want to compete for our fair share of the FDI flows around the world. In fact, I dare say we want to compete for more than our fair share of the FDI flows around the world. But anecdotally, you hear all the time about how wealthy Nigerians are. And just to your comment, we think it's important at NIPC that we're encouraging the generation of the development investment capital that exists in Nigeria. So in particular this year, we have a domestic direct investor drive that is aimed at encouraging Nigerians to invest in their own country. We're still working through some of the details, but we've been working, at least in my 6 months at NIPC, we've been working with several state governments on generating, first at the informal level, lists of wealthy Nigerians on a state-by-state basis, because we believe that it's important in the formation of this domestic investment capital that we have a proper representative spread across the country. We don't want it to come from just one part of the country. We don't want it to come from just one region. And the object is that these individuals will then form the anchors for our engagement about what it will take to get Nigerians to invest in their own country. We certainly think by tracking and by reporting what we're doing in relation to domestic direct investments, that we give foreign investments even more confidence in coming to the country. So it's something that we feel particularly strongly about, and we're working with the state governments on many levels. That's just one of them. We're working with the state governments on many levels. At NIPC, even though we're a federal agency, every investment that we generate will sit in the states, unless it sits in the FCT or the continental waters. In fact, this afternoon we had a session for state investment promotion agencies, and I was teasing some of the states that if they manage to generate investments in their states and they don't engage NIPC, we'll still take credit for it because we're a federal agency, but we would like to work closely with them to multiply our efforts. But generating domestic direct investments is an important part of our strategy at NIPC.
All right, let me just stay with you a little longer. And now the issue of the one-stop shop scheme, how is that being driven now?
The one-stop shop started in March 2006. Many people are not aware of it. It's been going on now for 11 years. And the object of the one-stop shop, even at that time, was focused on making it convenient for people to do business in Nigeria. It is conceived as one location where investors can get approvals and information from different government agencies. The one-stop shop currently has 27 government agencies, and it's all the engagements you can imagine that you need as an investor, starting first with NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics. So we feel very strongly that an investor will not make a decision on investing in a country, in a state and the like without first getting access to information. Then the next stage is to register the business as CAC. Then to FIRS to get a tax identification number, to Nigerian customs if you'll be importing, to Ministry of Interior and Immigration if you need expatriate quota or if you need visitors, if you need visas for your visitors, to NOTAP, to NAFDAC, to Standards Organization of Nigeria, to NERC, to Central Bank. There are 27 agencies anyway that sit there. Some of them have a physical presence, and others have a focal officer, you know, representing them, because the frequency of requests is not that high. But the one-stop center, it is, you know, I would like to say for now it is analog. But we're working, but our ultimate target is to make it even more convenient for investors to access digitally.
Right, the phone lines are already open. We have a first caller tonight. Calling in from Suleja, we have Idowu. Hello, Idowu, go ahead.
We were talking about ease of doing business. Most of the time we talk about the foreigners and we don't talk about the entrepreneurs, the young ones. Sometimes when you're talking about the entrepreneurs here, you talk about age limit. If you are above 35 and you want to do something, you are unable to access some fund, this and kind of a thing. And at the same time, you look at the foreigners that we are competing with. Most of the time when they collect this job, we are the Nigerians that we still do the same job. Like if the government pays them in dollars, and at the same time they will be paying us stipend for doing the work. If we are competing for such a work, the collateral or the kind of experience they will be coming with the question from you, we won't be able to meet up. What are you going to do about the entrepreneurs, the young ones that don't have the money to do this kind of a business? We are talking that we are many in this country and that we are doing this kind of a thing, but we are suffering from the kind series of laws. Let us talk about inside out ease of doing business before we talk about the foreigners or foreign investors first. And at the same time, the civil servants, most of the time, registered companies and use the different kind of people to hide under such, and at the same time give such contract out to themselves. At the same time, the entrepreneurs will be the ones suffering. What is the government or this present government doing about this? Thank you.
All right, Idowu.
Wow.
Actually, the issue is about investment. I suppose that your worry is about funding for those who wish to invest and access to funding, which is, of course, one of the factors that we have listed here.
I can speak to. So, thank you very much for the questions and the comments, and I could actually feel the pain, and this is at least 3 of those issues have been dealt with at the council or raised and are being operationalized. The first one, access to credit, is actually one of the things that we're working on, and what the council has been pushing this year in particular is 2 bills, because remember I mentioned at the beginning that we need to have legal and regulatory frameworks that make doing business more certain, secure, costless. Now, access to credit is something that disproportionately affects MSMEs, and actually the whole initiative is targeted at making things easier for MSMEs. So we've been pushing 2 laws in partnership with the National Assembly, the Credit Bureau's law, the Credit Bureau Bill, and the National Collateral Registry Bill. Now, those 2 bills, the way they help entrepreneurs like Idowu are that if you have a credit bureau record, then you have credit history, and banks are better able to give you credit for your businesses because they have more comfort and they would rather take the risk when your credit history is tried and tested and proven. And this is a known strategy across the world. So making that legislatively backed by law makes it much more stable and secure. We have 3 credit bureaus currently operating in Nigeria, and I urge just every SME to make sure that they're registered and they have sound credit histories, because it will make it cheaper and easier to access credit. That's the first thing. Now, the National Collateral Registry makes it easier for SMEs to use their movable property to access credit. So you can use your machinery, your cars, everything apart from land to access credit from institutions. So some banks, it opened last May, and already we have about 7 billion naira worth of property registered on the collateral register. When you have laws backing that framework, then more banks will go onto the collateral register. So they're not scared that you've sort of put a lane on your machinery in Abuja and then you go to Lagos and take a loan. So it's a national registry. So those are 2 things that could help. Any other areas?
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we have another caller, this time from Anambra, Ebele. Hello, Ebele.
Hello? Yeah, I'm on the line. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, please, you talk about this of entrepreneurship. So we that are started, we are starting off as religion. Please, do we have, hello? Please.
Yes, Ebele, go ahead.
Hello, please. What I'm about to say is that we that are approved now in area, we don't have any capital to start any business. But anyway, according to what the government says about helping, about helping man to people that don't know how they work and they are of business. So when we went to the kind of pressure that put on this type of payment to us is too much. And it makes to run away from the help.
Inaudible.
Oh dear. Hey Billy, I'm so sorry. The line isn't clear at all. We're finding it extremely difficult to get what you're saying. We may just have to ask you to call in again, to try again. Maybe the line will be clearer, but we just couldn't get it this time around. So just try and put in a call. Try and call in again, and maybe the line would be clearer. All right. Yes, we seem to be going in the same direction as the first caller talked about, access to credit, and of course some of the issues that have been raised here include tax regimes, and that in itself is one big worry for investors.
Well, if I may speak to that, there have been several reforms we're looking at achieving. One of the key policy planks of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is ensuring there's a stable macroeconomic environment. In the past, we've relied almost exclusively on oil wealth, not just to drive the oil sector, which is about more or less 9% of GDP, but there's a large amount of the non-oil sector that does depend on the earnings from oil to import inputs, market, and distribute locally. And so what we're looking to do is diversify another plan. And one of the key areas there is to try and increase our tax to GDP ratio, trying to focus more on non-oil revenues, and also trying to simplify and strengthen our tax administration system. So significant policy planks under the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is focusing on taxation, not just in terms of increasing revenues, but also making it easier to do business. However, one key issue is our tax take is quite small. So by different accounts, our tax GDP is about 5%, 6%. We're looking to increase that over the medium term to about 8 or 10%. So that's one key challenge we're looking at. And it's also part of the social contract to see people get value for their money, so they're encouraged to pay taxes more. So that's also part of it.
Yes, but there have been so many attempts in the past to do something about what's been referred to now as multiple taxation, and people have to pay so much to so many organizations, and at some point in time it just takes away everything you're trying to do, and that in itself is a drawback. The other issue also has to do with these numerous agencies that people have to deal with. If you speak to some small enterprises, they'll tell you that by the time they're through with NAFDAC, Standards Organization, so many of them, well, she mentioned about 27 of those.
27 that sit at our one-stop investment.
Okay. And for going through with a small business, you probably have, if you're into production, you probably have to go through maybe 5 or 6 of those, and the process is what people complain about. It's cumbersome. What's been done about that?
Well, there are two issues here. One is the tax issue in terms of simplifying our tax regime and making it easier for taxpayers to assess what taxes are repayable and to pay to the right or relevant tax authorities. The second issue, of course, is the regulatory regime, not just taxation, but business registration, standards, compliance, etc. So I'll speak probably to the tax issue, then my colleague will probably speak about the regulation. So on the tax issue, we're looking at different reforms that have been ongoing but have not come to a close in terms of simplifying the tax system. There are certain attempts to look at simplifying our tax laws to make it easier for taxpayers to assess what is payable. We're looking at different countries have done different reforms in terms of bringing about simpler means of assessing tax liabilities of different companies and individuals, and perhaps looking at certain schemes to encourage people to come voluntarily forward, declare their assets and income, and then see how we can ensure that they pay the right tax. However, Nigeria is a complicated country. We have a federal regime, and there are different tiers of taxes accruing to different agencies. So if we can get more taxes focused on, for instance, the indirect taxes, VAT, etc., then we can focus on simplifying direct taxes, income tax, corporate tax, and then encouraging the local governments particularly and the states to reduce the number of taxes they levy. But at the same time, this is the federal government I'm speaking for and from, and the states and the local governments have a separate regime.
Oh, okay. We'll return to the issue of value-added tax, but we have another caller on the line from Jos this time. Mohammed calling in from Jos. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Go right ahead.
What I want to contribute to is that the federal government of Nigeria have been making a lot of economic decisions since during the Babangida era up to this present democratic dispensation. And we know that we have trust in the Buhari administration. But why is it that the federal government, especially the position of Jumoke, cannot compel the state governor to form industries which they have comparative advantage? Like in the northern part of Nigeria, there is no fertilizer complex in the whole 19 states. There are no companies that we process our, let's say, tomatoes. So, in fact, we have a lot of compounded problems, especially in the northern part of Nigeria. Why is it that the federal government cannot just die? And the second thing is that Nigeria consumes a lot of vehicles. Why is it that we cannot tell Japan to come and establish industries that will produce spare parts for the vehicles we consume? Why is it that we take long periods in taking certain technical decisions and making a lot of blossom programs that will take us 2020, 2030, 2050. In fact, some of us will even die. We will never even see any of these programs that the federal government are talking about. So me, I'm in the position that, look, just take Jumoke especially, take a bold step within the presidency. Let's invite Japan, come and establish, or we stop consuming your vehicles. France come and like they have done in Peugeot and other countries that we are consuming their tangible assets in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right, so you heard the man.
I did, and I understand. I mean, really, what I would say is there's actually been quite a bit that has happened in at least everything that he's mentioned with agriculture and agribusiness, moving goods from the north down to the south. On the auto sector, funny enough, I was working on that last year with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. We've had actually the African Association of Automobile Makers working with the NDDC to just make sure that the policies, what they need as some requirements, we've actually invited them over. They've asked for legislation, they've asked for financing structure, about 4 things, and that we're actually working on. So the NADDC has been working aggressively at hitting all those that will make it comfortable for the big auto manufacturers, the original equipment providers. Of course, spare parts is one thing that we've been eager to have. Tires, we used to have Dunlop, we used to have Michelin. So everything he's saying is correct. That is exactly the direction in which we are going into. It's not even a 2020 plan. It's what is happening now. So I'm pleased to share that with Mohammed.
Okay. If I can just add to Jumoke's comment in relation in particular to auto. In collaboration with NADDC, NIPC is actually organizing an automotive components conference in Lagos on the 13th and 14th of June. And the object is, before you get auto manufacturers to come, there are different components that are required by a car that will be useful to have manufactured in Nigeria. And the object of that conference is to socialize automotive components manufacturers. And we've engaged a number of countries in which automotive parts or car makers are, to get them to come to Nigeria. We've also had conversations with leading car manufacturers in different parts of the world about establishing manufacturing facilities in Nigeria. As you know, a number have already done so. In particular, I refer to, the car manufacturers in Nigeria. Innocent makes cars in Nigeria. Costaris Motors assembles Ford cars in Nigeria. The object is not that Nigeria remains an importer of cars. Nigeria is a country with 183 million people. There's no country in the world that makes cars. Every country assembles cars. And using our trade and investment policies, our object is to move some of that value that is added in the car assembly process to Nigeria. So we're completely aligned with the caller.
All right. At this point, we'll take out the cameras and talk to some Nigerians. They've got what they understand by how business is done, the ease of doing business. Let's talk to Nigerians.
Any loan from bank, of course, we all know the interest rate. That interest rate cannot help any business to thrive. So, unless government itself is really committed and serious, what government needs to do is soft loan. That's number one. Number two, creating enabling environment. Electricity, good roads, water.
As far as the commercial banks are concerned, or the merchant banks, they don't seem to want to key into this arrangement because probably they are not used to it. What they are usually used to is just lending people money to do business and getting collaterals and all that. They are not used to, or probably they are not, they need to get this orientation on how to assist entrepreneurs to give them, to make it easy for them to access loans, and so that they can also grow the economy at the same time.
The process for you to get the loan is not encouraging. And some people will be frustrated, they can't go on going, maybe you don't have collateral, or even if they say there's no collateral, no the Nigerian factors.
That
getting their loans now is going to be easy, according to the federal government. Probably it all depends on how the federal government wants to do it in between federal government, CVN, and the banks. But the unfortunate thing is, in most of these things, you would discover that, like in the administration of Buhari, I'm sure he will do his best to see that things get easier for Nigerians. But it all depends on the people handling it. Our problem is corruption. That's what is not allowing a lot of things to work.
Banks are not helping small businesses to grow in Nigeria. In a situation whereby you need a loan to finance, soft loan to finance your business as an entrepreneur, as a small business owners, the banks in Nigeria would send you to a business oblivion. So that is the first challenges, that every right-thinking business owners in Nigeria, faces. Our banks are not helping matters. Another thing is a government policy.
Having an access to loan in this part of the world, it's like a camel passing through the eyes of a needle. Why do I have to say that? In the first instance, the government are not helping issue. It's like they are making a lip service. And it's not everybody that is accessible to loan. There are people ordinarily when they go to the bank, it's like a risk. There are cultural factors. When you go to the bank will ask you, bring this, bring that for collateral. Up to the extent of telling you, please go to your district head and let them recognize whether you are part and parcel of that community.
Well, it would seem that more people are talking about access to credit. That seems to be
yeah,
the baseline.
I think access to credit, between power, access to credit, you get a lot of feedback on that. And like I said earlier, so the thing about banks is that banks are strictly regulated because these are depositors' funds. And banks cannot give out depositors' funds when they're, people say, okay, I went to the bank, I didn't get money. But the money in the bank is people's money. If the bank goes under, then, everybody would be like, where was the CBN? How come the bank was so risky or so? But what we've tried to put in place are regulatory measures that would ensure that the banks are more comfortable to give out riskier loans. And the reason why MSMEs are more risky than established corporates is because all the structures are not yet there. They're growing businesses. So it's a catch-22. But nobody in the world starts a business with a loan from a bank.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'd just like to go quickly back to what the earlier caller, Mohammed from Jos, referred to. I wonder what your approach to this would be. He doesn't seem to like long-term, plans. He'd rather have a quick fix. Do you see this as a quick fix, or medium-term, or long-term? Because that will now take us to the issue of sustainability.
Maybe.
Right.
Maybe I should speak to that in terms of the plan. So, to follow on what Dr. Jumoke had said earlier, many aspects of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which is a medium-term plan looking at 2017 to 2020, build on previous plans. So we had the Vision 2010, we had the Vision 2020. And some of the policies that were continuing, for instance, the automobile policy, were started under previous plans. The challenge, however, is if you look at across the other countries we looked at when we're developing the plan, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., most of these countries have sustainable plans that dovetail into each other. For instance, China was on its 13th five-year plan. Indonesia was on its 9th. So you have to have some continuity in government policy, and the planning framework is a good basis to have this. Going down to specifics, we've got power and access to finance, the key issues. In the plan, what we look at is trying to enhance power generation and also deal with some of the long-term issues. Recently, there was a power sector privatization. Gencos and Discos were privatized. But there's still some nagging issues. For instance, Disco liquidity, trying to ensure that MBET, the bulk trader company, can de-risk the market so that Gencos get paid on time and Discos can pay for the services pay for the power that's being supplied to their consumers. So there are various aspects of the plan, particularly a power sector recovery plan, that have been approved, particularly in March, and we're looking to try and ensure that we build on the previous policies and also ensure that we have got a sustainable framework to go into the future. In terms of ease of doing business and accessing loans, we recognize that some initial projects may not be the sort of projects that are bankable from a commercial banking point of view. So what we're looking at is enhancing our development finance institutions. We're proposed 15 billion naira, and we're looking to leverage more capital from foreign multilateral lenders to capitalize the Development Bank of Nigeria, ensure the Bank of Agriculture and Bank of Industry have capital to lend. We're also looking at the social investment program, pursuant to which we have $500 billion naira invested in some social projects, focusing on small and medium-sized businesses, ensuring they have small soft loans, and also looking at enhance the capacity of artisans and traders. So there are various projects we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that every SMA or every business has different ways of accessing the funding and the capital and the support they need. So that's why the planning framework is useful, because you provide a holistic basis for development.
Let me make a couple of points. You know, all the questions, even the barely audible a question that we had from Abele and Mohammed in Jos, and the footage that you showed us. There is a street level view to the issues we're discussing, and there is a cockpit view. What is obvious is we're dealing with the same question, and that question is this: how do we drive a growth in the Nigerian economy? And how does government, in its role, create an enabling environment for SMEs, small businesses, major firms? The answer is not a simple one, but there are best practices and there are answers to these questions. Number one, absolutely important is coherence between fiscal monetary policies and structural reform policies. There has to be an interlock across the whole gamut of policies to be able to deal in a systematic and coherent way with the questions that you're hearing and the concerns of Nigerians. Part of what I heard Abele in Enugu asking, I had something like, how do we pay credit cards? And so you have to deal with areas of the 21st century economy. That is part of the ease of doing business. That is a priority for this government, and that is the digital economy. Yesterday, the acting president, Professor Shinbajo, presided over the third quarterly briefing dialogue with the private sector. And this was one of the key areas. We have to shift this economy from an analog, to use Yawande's expression, to a digital mode. We have to be able to do things quicker. E-government, greater efficiency, digitization of data. It's only when we begin to achieve this level of efficiency that we'll be able to respond in real time to the concerns and comments that you hear. Second question, and this is in part what I gathered from what Mohammed in Jos said, compel Japan. I love that verb. Compel that economy to come and invest.
Are you in a position to do that?
No, we're not in a position to do that, but it tells you something about the urgency of the response that economic policy managers have to implement and deliver to begin to respond to the real concerns of Nigerians. And this is where trade negotiations come in. Mohammed, we cannot compel them. We can't even compel domestic Nigerians with our federal structure, but we can negotiate with them to be able to come to this country to invest and to begin to have a better distribution in terms of the resource allocation, in terms of the distribution of comparative advantage across this economy. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. But again, a point that I would like to place on the table is about the coherence of policies.
All right. We probably would require this negotiation skills to, like you talked about, to get the states and probably local governments to buy into what you call the comparative advantage in investing in certain areas. But we'll take a short break here. Stay with us. When we return after these messages, there'll be more on the ease of doing business. This is Tuesday Live.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. The discussion has been going on behind the scenes here about how easy it is to do business here. And just before we took a break, in one of his answers, Ambassador spoke of policy, getting the coherence. And this is what many Nigerians talk about. yes, you have something in place now, and we tie that with the issue of sustainability, but we haven't, we've always had policies and plans, but they have never really translated into action that's needed to address or